My name is Eleanor Ellie Hartwell, and I never thought my son would betray me like this. It all started on a chilly October evening when the leaves outside my Connecticut apartment were turning shades of amber and gold. My son, Sebastian Hartwell, Seb to those who know him, and his wife Vivian showed up at my door unannounced. They had that look about them, the kind where you can tell they've been rehearsing what they're going to say for days. At first I thought it was just another visit to check in on me, but I should have known better. Seb's visits always have an agenda these days. As we sat around my dining table, Vivian began buttering me up with compliments about how well I've kept the place over the years. Then came the knife twist. "You know, Ellie," she said sweetly, leaning forward as if she were sharing some life-changing wisdom, "this apartment could really help us secure our future. If you transferred ownership to us, or better yet to me, we could use it as collateral for a business loan." She paused, probably waiting for applause or something. When I didn't respond right away, Seb chimed in awkwardly, "It's not like you need it anymore, Mom. You've got your pension and, well, we're family." Family? Is that what this is now? A transaction disguised as love? I couldn't sleep that night. Their words echoed in my head like a broken record. How dare they come into my home, the home I built brick by brick after my husband passed, and demand I hand it over. This apartment wasn't just four walls. It held memories of laughter, tears, and every milestone of my life. I remembered painting the living room yellow because Mark, my late husband, said it reminded him of sunshine. Now they wanted to turn it into a bargaining chip for their so-called dreams. The next morning I called Harold, an old friend from church who happens to be a lawyer. He listened patiently as I recounted the conversation, occasionally muttering things like, "Kids these days." When I finished, he gave me two pieces of advice. 1. Don't let guilt dictate your decisions, and 2. Consider selling the apartment outright if I didn't want to deal with their nonsense anymore. That's when the idea sparked in my mind. What if I sold it before they even knew what hit them? Not out of spite, well, maybe a little, but mostly because I deserved to make choices for myself for once. The real estate agent came by the following week, a cheerful woman named Clara who seemed genuinely excited about listing my apartment. As she snapped photos and measured rooms, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. Sadness because I'd lived here for 30 years, and liberation because I realized I didn't owe anyone anything, not even my own flesh and blood. The market was hot, and within days, Clara told me she already had several interested buyers. Meanwhile, Seb kept calling, asking why I hadn't signed the papers yet. Each time I brushed him off with vague excuses like, "I'm still thinking about it," or, "Let me pray on it." Truthfully, I was enjoying watching him squirm. 4 years I'd bent over backward for him, working double shifts as a nurse while raising him alone, scraping together tuition money for his fancy law degree, and now he couldn't even spare me the dignity of owning my own home. Every unanswered call felt like a tiny act of rebellion. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in my rocking chair and think about all the sacrifices I made for Seb. Like the time I missed my high school reunion because he had a soccer game, or the Christmas when I skipped buying presents for myself so he could have the latest gaming console. Back then I told myself it was worth it. But now I wondered if any of it mattered to him. Did he ever stop to think about how hard I worked? Or was I just a means to an end? One particular memory stood out, his graduation day. I wore my best dress and cheered louder than anyone else in the audience. Afterward he hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thanks, Mom. I wouldn't be here without you." Where did that boy go? The man sitting across from me now barely resembled him. Somewhere along the way, ambition replaced gratitude and greed overshadowed love. Selling the apartment suddenly felt less like revenge and more like reclaiming myself. The sale went through faster than I expected. By mid-November, the apartment belonged to someone else, a young couple expecting their first child. They promised to take good care of it, which eased my guilt slightly. With the money, I bought a small cottage in Maine, nestled among pine trees near the ocean. It was modest compared to the apartment, but it felt like mine in a way nothing else ever had. Before leaving Connecticut, I set aside a portion of the proceeds to donate anonymously to local charities. One of them was a food bank Seb used to volunteer at during college. I figured it was poetic justice, letting him reap the benefits of generosity he no longer practiced himself. Watching him scramble to explain why he wasn't involved in these philanthropic efforts amused me more than it probably should have. Karma, as they say, is a dish best served cold. When Seb finally found out about the sale, he exploded. "How could you do this to us? he shouted over the phone, his voice trembling with rage. Vivian chimed in too, accusing me of being selfish and ruining their lives. Ruining their lives? Oh, the irony. All I'd done was protect mine. I sold it because it was mine to sell, I replied calmly, though inside I was seething. And if you think I'm going to let you treat me like an ATM, you're sorely mistaken. There was a long pause on the other end, followed by Vivian hissing, "You'll regret this, Eleanor." Regret? No, sweetheart, I won't. But you might. Things escalated quickly after that. Seb filed a lawsuit against me, claiming I acted irresponsibly by selling the apartment without consulting him. Irresponsibly? The audacity of that accusation almost made me laugh. Thankfully, Harold assured me we had nothing to worry about legally. Still, the stress weighed heavily on me. Nights in my new cottage were quiet, but my mind buzzed with thoughts of what might happen next. To add insult to injury, Vivian started spreading rumors around town, painting me as a bitter old woman clinging to her possessions. People I'd known for years began looking at me differently, whispering behind my back. It hurt, yes, but it also hardened my resolve. If they wanted a villain, I'd give them one. That's when I decided to escalate my revenge. Using part of the remaining funds, I anonymously donated large sums to various organizations in Seb's name. Suddenly, everyone expected him to attend galas, host fundraisers, and lead initiatives he had no intention of participating in. His reputation took a nosedive as people questioned his integrity. Meanwhile, Vivian grew colder toward him, blaming him for their financial woes. Watching their marriage crumble was almost therapeutic. Almost. The cracks in Seb and Vivian's marriage became impossible to ignore. Every time I saw them together, at least when they bothered to visit, it was like watching two strangers stuck in a sinking ship, pointing fingers at each other while the water rose higher. Vivian's voice grew sharper with every argument, her designer heels clicking angrily across the hardwood floors of their house. "You promised me security," she'd snap, glaring daggers at Seb. And Seb, he just sat there, defeated, muttering apologies that sounded more like surrender than reconciliation. Meanwhile, I kept my distance, content to let karma do its work. But guilt crept in sometimes, usually late at night when the ocean waves outside my cottage lulled me into moments of quiet reflection. Was I being too harsh? Should I have tried harder to reason with them instead of retaliating? Then I'd remember the way they treated me, like I was nothing more than a resource to exploit, and the guilt would fade, replaced by a steely determination. They made their bed, now they could lie in it. By the time winter rolled around, Vivian had stopped answering Seb's calls altogether. She moved out shortly after New Year's, leaving behind half-packed boxes and a note that simply read, "It's over." Seb called me the next day, his voice trembling as he begged me to take him back in. "Mom, please," he pleaded. "I don't know what to do without you." For a brief moment my heart softened. But then I remembered how easily he abandoned me when Vivian whispered poison in his ear. Instead of caving, I sent him a letter. In it, I explained everything. The years of sacrifice, the betrayal I felt, and why I chose to sell the apartment. I ended with a line that still echoes in my mind today. "I gave you everything I had. Now I'm giving myself peace." It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was honest. And honesty, I've learned, is often the hardest thing to face. Spring arrived in Maine like a breath of fresh air, both literally and figuratively. The snow melted away, revealing green shoots poking through the soil, and I found myself settling into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. I volunteered at the local community center, teaching knitting classes to retirees and baking pies for church fundraisers. People here didn't care about lawsuits or scandals. They cared about kindness and connection. It was refreshing, to say the least. Still, news of Seb's downfall reached me occasionally. Mutual acquaintances would call or send emails updating me on his struggles. Apparently, he lost his job after word got out about the lawsuit. Clients didn't want to associate with someone who sued their own mother, no matter how polished his resume looked. I tried not to gloat, but it was hard not to feel a sense of vindication. Justice, it seemed, had a funny way of finding those who deserved it. One afternoon, while tending to my garden, I received a text from Harold. "Heard Seb's hitting rock bottom," it read. "Divorce finalized last week. Poor guy's living in a studio apartment downtown." My hands froze mid-dig. Studio apartment? The thought of Seb, a man who once prided himself on luxury cars and tailored suits, reduced to such simplicity, struck a chord deep within me. Part of me wanted to celebrate. Another part couldn't help but ache for the boy I once raised. That night, I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window, staring out at the moonlit waves. I thought about all the times I'd bandaged his scraped knees, helped him study for exams and cheered him on during soccer games. How did we end up here? When did ambition blind him so completely that he forgot where he came from? The questions swirled in my mind like storm clouds, heavy and unresolved. Forgiveness felt impossibly far away. A few weeks later, I attended a charity gala hosted by one of the organizations I'd anonymously funded. As I mingled with guests, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries, I overheard snippets of conversations about Seb. Some praised his supposed generosity, unaware of the truth. Others criticized his absence, wondering aloud why he hadn't shown up to support causes bearing his name. Listening to them, I realized something. My revenge had become its own form of cruelty. After dinner, I was asked to give a short speech. Standing under the spotlight, I hesitated for a moment before speaking. Life is complicated, I began, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. We make mistakes, hurt the people we love, and sometimes lose sight of what truly matters. But forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to move forward, even when it's hard. The room fell silent, and for a fleeting moment I wished Seb could hear me. Maybe then he'd understand why I did what I did. Back home, I drafted another letter to Seb. This one was different from the first. Softer, less accusatory. I acknowledged his recent hardships and expressed my hope that he might find a way to rebuild his life. I forgive you, I wrote, surprising even myself. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. If you ever want to mend our relationship, you'll have to earn my trust again. I sealed the envelope and placed it on my desk, unsure if I'd ever send it. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery where Mark was buried. Kneeling beside his grave, I told him everything. The sale, the lawsuit, the revenge. What should I do? I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Of course, there was no answer, only the rustling of leaves overhead. But somehow just saying the words aloud brought a strange sense of clarity. Whatever happened next, I knew I couldn't keep holding on to anger forever. It was exhausting. Days turned into weeks and I still hadn't sent the letter to Seb. It sat on my desk like an unspoken promise, taunting me every time I walked past it. Part of me wanted to reach out, to offer him a lifeline, but another part feared opening old wounds. What if he rejected my olive branch? Worse, what if he pretended to change only to hurt me again? The thought paralyzed me, leaving me stuck in limbo between hope and caution. Then one rainy afternoon I received an email from Seb. The subject line read simply, "Mom." My heart raced as I clicked it open. His words were raw, almost desperate. "I don't know where to start," he wrote. "Everything's falling apart and I don't recognize the man I've become. I'm sorry, for everything. For Vivian, for the lawsuit, for treating you like you didn't matter. I was wrong, Mom. So wrong." Tears blurred my vision as I read his message over and over again. This wasn't the polished, calculated Sebastian I'd known for years. This was my son, the broken, vulnerable boy I used to hold when storms scared him. For days I debated whether to respond. Finally, I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and typed out a reply. "Your apology means something to me," I began. "But actions speak louder than words, Seb. If you truly want to make amends, prove it, not with grand gestures but with consistency. Show me that the man who wrote this email is the same one standing beside me 6 months from now." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then stared out the window as raindrops streaked the glass like tears. The next day Seb called. His voice cracked as he thanked me for responding, promising he'd do whatever it took to earn back my trust. I listened silently, letting his words sink in. There was sincerity there, painful, fragile sincerity, but I reminded myself not to let my guard down too quickly. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. It grows slowly, like ivy climbing a brick wall. Over the following months, Seb started making small changes. He found a job as a paralegal, humbling himself after years of chasing prestige. He attended counseling sessions to work through his guilt and anger, though he admitted some days were harder than others. Once he even showed up at my cottage unannounced, bringing a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked along the way. "I know it's not much," he said sheepishly, "but I wanted to try." At first I kept our interactions brief, testing the waters cautiously. But gradually I allowed myself to soften. We'd take long walks along the beach talking about anything except the past. He told me about his struggles adjusting to his new life, how loneliness gnawed at him during quiet nights. In return, I shared stories about Mark, funny anecdotes and tender memories Seb had never heard before. It felt strange reconnecting after so much distance, but also healing. Despite his efforts, not everyone forgave Seb so easily. News of his downfall spread faster than wildfire, tarnishing his reputation beyond repair. Former colleagues avoided him at networking events, and acquaintances whispered behind his back. Even Vivian refused to acknowledge him entirely, flaunting her new marriage to a wealthy entrepreneur on social media. Watching her move on stung more than Seb cared to admit. One evening, after a particularly rough day, he broke down in front of me. "Why does it feel like no one believes in me anymore?" he asked, his voice trembling. I placed a hand on his shoulder, unsure how to answer. The truth was painful. People trust actions, not apologies. And while Seb was trying, rebuilding trust takes time he hadn't yet earned. Still, I squeezed his shoulder gently and said, "Keep going. One step at a time." As summer approached, I found myself invited to speak at another charity event. This time I chose to share my story openly. The betrayal, the revenge, and the tentative reconciliation. Standing on stage, I looked out at the sea of faces and spoke from the heart. "We all make mistakes," I said. "Some bigger than others. But what defines us isn't the mistakes themselves. It's how we choose to learn from them. Forgiveness isn't easy, but holding on to anger only weighs us down. Sometimes, peace comes from letting go." Afterward, several attendees approached me, thanking me for my honesty. One woman, a mother whose adult daughter had cut ties with her, hugged me tightly. "Your words gave me hope," she whispered. As I drove home that night, I realized something profound. Forgiving Seb wasn't just about him. It was about freeing myself from bitterness. Only then could I truly heal. That fall, Seb visited Maine more frequently. He helped me rake leaves, fix loose shingles, and repaint the porch railing. Each task brought us closer, mending the invisible rift between us. One chilly October evening, as we sat by the fireplace sipping hot cocoa, he turned to me and said, "Mom, I owe you an explanation." He went on to describe how Vivian had manipulated him, how she convinced him that success meant wealth, status, and power. "I let her control me because I thought it would make her happy," he confessed. "But all it did was push me further away from the people who mattered most. From you." His admission caught me off guard, stirring up emotions I thought I'd buried. Pain, yes, but also understanding. For the first time in years, I saw glimpses of the boy I raised. A boy capable of growth, redemption, and love. As winter approached, Seb and I settled into a fragile but hopeful rhythm. He visited me every other weekend, helping around the house and sharing meals that tasted more like home than anything I'd cooked in years. But beneath the surface, doubts lingered, both his and mine. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground, he asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Do you think I'll ever be enough for you again?" His voice was soft, almost childlike, and it broke my heart. I took a moment before answering, choosing my words carefully. "You're already enough, Seb," I said finally. "But trust isn't something I can just hand back. It's something you earn day by day. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever fully let go of what happened." The honesty hung heavy between us, but I knew it was necessary. Forgiveness doesn't erase scars. It simply teaches us how to live with them. The holidays rolled around, and for the first time in years, Seb joined me for Christmas. We decorated the cottage together, stringing lights along the windows and hanging ornaments I'd collected over decades. As we stood side by side admiring our work, I felt a flicker of warmth, a reminder of the joy we used to share. That night after dinner, Seb handed me a small gift wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a framed photo of him as a boy, sitting proudly beside Mark on a fishing trip. "I thought you might like this," he said quietly. Tears welled up in my eyes as I traced the edges of the frame. It wasn't just a photograph. It was a piece of our past, a testament to the family we once were. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe we could find our way back to each other, to rebuild what had been lost. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that some wounds run too deep to heal completely. By February, Seb seemed to be thriving, or at least pretending to. He landed a steady job at a legal aid clinic, where he helped low-income families navigate court proceedings. He even started mentoring troubled teens, using his own mistakes as a cautionary tale. "I want to make a difference," he told me one evening. "Not for recognition but because I need to prove, to myself, that I'm not the man I used to be." Still, there were moments when the weight of his past threatened to pull him under. Late one night he called me in tears, confessing that he still struggled with feelings of inadequacy. "What if I mess up again?" he asked. "What if I lose everything all over again?" My heart ached for him but I couldn't shield him from the truth. "Life is messy, Seb," I replied. "All you can do is keep moving forward, one step at a time." The final blow came unexpectedly. On a crisp spring morning, I received a call from Seb's boss. Apparently, Seb had collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital. By the time I arrived, doctors explained that stress and exhaustion had taken their toll, leading to a severe panic attack. As I sat by his bedside watching him sleep fitfully, I realized how much he'd been carrying alone. All the guilt, shame, and fear bottled up inside him. When he woke, he looked at me with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I tried so hard to fix things but I don't think I ever will." His words shattered me. For all my efforts to forgive, I hadn't truly seen the toll his redemption journey had taken on him. That night, as I drove back to my cottage through the misty darkness, I understood something painful but undeniable. Forgiveness doesn't always lead to healing. Sometimes the damage runs too deep, leaving everyone scarred, even those who try their hardest to mend it. Months later, I returned to the cemetery where Mark was buried. Spring flowers bloomed around his headstone, painting the landscape in vibrant hues. Kneeling beside him, I shared the story of Seb's struggles, the battles he fought, the victories he claimed, and the losses he endured. "I wanted to save him," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But maybe some people aren't meant to be saved. Maybe all we can do is love them even when they break our hearts." As I walked away, the wind carried the scent of fresh earth and blooming lilacs. Life moves forward whether we're ready or not, carrying us toward endings we never anticipated. In the end, I learned that love isn't about fixing someone, it's about accepting them, flaws and all. And sometimes acceptance means letting go even when it hurts the most. Love demands sacrifice, but true forgiveness requires courage. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means finding peace within ourselves, no matter how imperfect the journey may be.